Hi, everybody. Hello, everybody. I hope you can see me. This is um, our second Platon live session, and very excited to do this again. I'm really enjoying the connection with with the people. It's what a privilege to have a sort of format where we can communicate and talk and bypass the middleman, the establishment in the media. This is nice. We just go direct to each other and have a proper conversation without those filters. So I'm sitting here in my studio as I was last time. I've got Michelle right here. Hi. And I've got Mike back there. And there's even somewhere in the back, there's my daughter, Polly, working away. So this is the whole team. Okay, so Michelle, what have you got?
So I thought we'd kind of kick this off with a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of your background, what kind of work inspires you. You've spoken a lot in the past about how Richard Avedon inspired you, particularly with his American West project. Avedon simplified the world down to a face and said that a face says it all. You've made that approach distinctly your own. How did Avedon's work shape your vision, and how do you decide when a single face holds the entire story?
When we all begin our journey, we're all looking for keys and paths. And it can be very daunting to figure out how you get from where you are to where someone else is that seems to be very successful. And we do it creatively, aesthetically, culturally, and we also do it strategically with networking. And, all of us have done that. You have to do that. It would be crazy not to learn from history, because people have broken barriers in the past so that future generations have an easier journey. So it's inevitable that, all photographers have to look at photographers who have gone before and try and learn from, their successes and their failures. I remember dealing with this, is it bad to copy or to be influenced? I think when you're young and you're beginning your journey, you need to absorb as much as you can. So for me, I remember I was at art college. I didn't really know much about photography. I was just beginning to take pictures, and my mum and dad, for a Christmas present, gave me a book. And it wasn't of Richard Avedon or Irving Penn or Helmut Newton, who are the three heavyweights in my opinion. It was of David Bailey's work, and I've got the book here. And it's David Bailey's 60s work, Black and White Memories. And it's got all his famous kind of pictures of the Cray twins, the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, sort of Gene Shrimpton, Twiggy. And it just opened a door for me, because it helped me articulate what I wanted to say. And I didn't yet have the tools to say it. I certainly didn't have the references. So this book became my Bible. And I remember the feeling of, you open the covers of the book and it's as if you're opening a door into a new magical world. And every single picture I memorized. And I was thinking, right, how does that lighting work? And why is it cool when it's on a pure white background? And suddenly it made sense because of my background, in a Greek village, seeing all those houses in the village, which were white. And I'd done drawings against them of the old people. So there was this weird connection that made sense. And so many other things, the high contrast levels that Bailey always had. But there was something else about David Bailey that was really interesting to me, because unlike Avedon, generally speaking, and unlike Penn, generally speaking. Bailey was at that time much younger, and he was taking pictures of people he knew. He was even taking pictures of Jean Shrimpton, who was his girlfriend at the time, who was the famous 60s model. So there was a closeness to his subjects. I think as time went on, it's very difficult to maintain that closeness as he gets older and his platform gets bigger. But certainly those early pictures, they were all his contemporaries. The Beatles were his age. The Rolling Stones were his age. He was part of the 60s youth explosion. And there was this sort of intimacy. There wasn't a hierarchy of photographer and subject. They were all in it together. They were all discovering a whole new world together. And it shows in the pictures, quite frankly. And that was very interesting to me. He was part of it. And it's hard to separate Bailey from the content. And I thought that's very interesting. So that made a huge impression on me. As I started, I realized I've got to get close to my subjects. I can't do it in the same way Bailey did it, because I was not as cool as Bailey was when he was young. And I didn't know any famous people, and I didn't know any pop stars or movie stars. So I just knew my friends in the college, and I would photograph students in the college canteen, and I would invite people off the street into our studio that we built in the college in London. And I even went one day, I started photographing all shopkeepers who were in my neighborhood, and I'd grown up as a kid going, when we moved to England, we always stayed in the same neighborhood. So the local shopkeepers were people we knew, so I photographed them, and this relationship was important. So I wanted to begin by paying tribute, not necessarily to Avedon or Penn or Helmut Newton, who are the masters, but to David Bailey, and say thank you, Bailey, for opening a door for me. And it's quite funny because I just had a quick lunch in my favorite diner in New York around the corner. It's called the Square Diner. It's fantastic. And it's an old school diner, one of the few left. And the people there, lovely couple, Greek couple who run it. And I was sitting there chatting to the lady who runs it, lovely lady. And suddenly this young guy comes up to me and he says, sorry to interrupt your lunch, but my mum's a huge fan of yours. And he said, she got me into your work and I'm a huge fan of yours. And I just wanted to say thank you for inspiring us in your work. And I just thought, wow, that just totally made my day. And it's never an intrusion to hear someone's gratitude for inspiration. And it just made me think that I should kick off today also saying thank you to the people that inspired me. And so the journey continues and the cycle continues. And if there's anyone out there that we can reach their hearts and try and lift their spirits to keep going when they're having a bit of a down day in their work, I think that's what we've got to do today. So it's a good way to kick off today's session with gratitude for the people that came before us.
Cool. Switching a little bit more to the technical side, we have a question here from Misha Hicks. They said in the book Darkroom to Daylight, you were interviewed regarding a switch to digital and that it wasn't there for you yet. Has that changed? And how do you feel about the resurgence of film?
Well, I mean, anyone who knows my work knows I love film. There's a spirit that comes with it. My team love film. It's not digital. It's real. It's authentic. Has a soul, and it's temperamental, and you have to make a commitment. You can't just shoot as much as you want because it's too expensive, and you can't just change something from color to black and white. You make a choice at that moment. So there's a magical thing that comes with that discipline. And I may have said this in our last session, I can't remember, but you know, when I was starting, I was so broke, and anyone who shoots film knows how expensive it is. So I could only afford to do. I started doing one roll of film per shoot. But then I realized that if there's a complication in my processing with that film and it goes down, I should really shoot at least 1.5 rolls, so that if one roll goes down, I've still got another roll, and hopefully that will be all right. So I expanded to 1.5 rolls, and that was a great discipline. So you've got 12 shots in your 120 film through Hasselblad to do one roll, and 10 shots means you've covered the ground. But by the time you get 10, you've got 2 frames left. And that's the time to up the ante, push it. This is your chance to get the thing that you need to do, and take the chance and roll the dice. Because after that 12th frame, you have to break. You have to change backs. Probably roll a new film, put it back in, load a new film, put it back on the back. By the time you've done that, everything's changed. You've broken concentration, subject's looking away. You're distracted by reloading, and you've lost something. So you've got to get it in that one roll, and then the extra half a roll is, well, let's just cover ourselves and try and re-find it again. So that became a huge discipline for me, and it's lasted throughout my life, to be honest, because even when I photographed Putin, I wasn't allowed an assistant. And I remember thinking, okay, it's been a long time since I've gone right back to square one again, but I'm going in, I'm probably only going to have a few minutes, if at all, and I have no idea what I'm up against. And so I loaded 2 rolls of film, and I shot one roll, and the light wasn't quite right, and I was distracted by the chaos and the intimidation. And then I shot another half a roll before the shoot was over. So 1.5 rolls, and actually the half a roll that I did as an addition saved me, because that's where the best pictures were. So it comes in handy, that kind of discipline. Of course, now digital, you could say, has caught up. And there is a place for it. Certainly, it allows us to shoot as much as we need, and you can edit straight away. So if you're facing a really tight deadline, you have instant access to to whatever you've just done. There's a lot of bad things that come with digital. Of course, everyone's got so used to it, and you can now see what you're shooting, literally. In the old days, I would do a Polaroid of just the empty chair. I would never do a Polaroid on my subjects, never. I would do a light test on the empty chair, or my assistant, or anyone in the room as a stand-in, just to check the light is working, the lens is working, the camera feels good. And then when the person walks in, we're on, that's it. You can't waste a frame. But of course, with digital, everyone's got used to seeing everything as you do it. And of course, that is very stressful for me. And I've done big shoots where the client insists on, if we're working with a client, they insist on seeing everything that we do. It's tethered. And I can't tell you how that can be traumatizing to me, because it's not really for anyone else to see. Certainly not my subjects, not even for me. It has to be a spiritual connection between my subject, and it shouldn't be discussed and debated as we go, because the journey is in flux. So I hate that side of digital. And often now when I am shooting digital, we don't tether anything. No one can see. We photographed President Trump digitally for the cover of Time magazine recently, for Person of the Year. It was a very historic moment. He was, at that moment, and is the most powerful man in the world. And it was a few days after his second election victory. So it was it was a moment in Mar-a-Lago for sure. So we had to do it digitally because the deadline was so tight. And I remember Trump leans forward and he says, "Can I see?" halfway through the shoot. And that was one of those moments where, you know, am I a proper artist or am I a servant to the system? And I just said, "No, you can't see." I said, "I can't even see. I'm not looking. Neither should you." So it was a moment, we all waited, and then he said, "Okay." He backed off. He respected my position as an artist, perhaps because I meant it. And I think at some point you have to earn people's trust. If you go to a dentist, I'm not going to ask to see their certificates and their qualifications. And I'm not going to ask to see what tools they're going to use to pull my teeth. I'm just going to hope that they bloody well know what they're doing. And I think at some point you just have to respect the person you're working with. And to Trump's credit, he backed off and he let me just do what I do. And consequently, the results, I think, were really good. And as far as I know, he loved them too. So we're good. All right, next question.
So obviously with YouTube, you're shifting into video and film a bit. Some people are curious to know what films inspire you, and do these films impact your current YouTube work and documentaries?
Oh, that's a really good question. I love cinema. In fact, these days, I'm not looking at photography at all. I haven't really looked at these lovely photography books in years. It's kind of memorized now in my brain. But I do look at cinema all the time. I'm currently going through a mad crush on the Italian New Wave. So Visconti, Antonioni, Fellini. I'm revisiting all those incredible films. Scorsese for me was a huge early hero, as was Orson Welles. In fact, when I first saw Taxi Driver, it blew my mind so much that I actually, in those days, we used to have VHS videotapes. That's going back past history here. And I had a crappy VHS player, and I recorded Taxi Driver off the TV one night, and I paused every few moments and wrote out the script in my notebooks. We didn't have the internet in those days, didn't have access to a script, so I had to kind of do it manually. And as I was writing in my notebooks what was being said, I was also making notes about the visuals, what was happening on screen. And it really taught me a lot about narrative, but also about not being obvious and daring to be transparent about the struggle of creativity, and certainly the rawness of New York that poured into that film. Of course, I would end up in New York, and of course, New York would end up, I mean, it's the city of ambition. I would end up shooting so much on the streets in New York. And that grit permeated my work. And I remember getting to photograph Scorsese as one of my first jobs in America. John Kennedy Jr. asked me to photograph the 20 most fascinating men in America as my first job for George magazine in the 90s. And guess who was on the list? Martin Scorsese. So I was like, oh my God, I'm about to meet an all-time hero. And I spent the day with him he had some kind of office complex in Manhattan, and he had a private screening room where he watches all his movies and probably Final Cut and makes notes. And he told me that the room was freezing when we went in there. And I'm a Mediterranean man. I belong in the heat. I can't deal with the cold. And I remember shivering while I'm trying to take his picture. And I said, why'd you have the room so cold? Is there no heating here? He says, I keep it cold on purpose because it creates a tension in me while I'm editing, while I'm watching my films. I don't want to feel comfortable. I want to feel as if I'm on the edge of my seat physically as well as emotionally. And that made so much sense to me. So little things like that, I feel so privileged that I often get to meet my heroes. Not always, but often. But so cinema for me is huge. And when now we're filming all my shoots, I don't really want to do sort of BTS or whatever they call it, or there's this terrible word everyone uses in the industry called content, providing content. What the hell does that mean? I mean, content is just a filler. You put content in between two bricks in a wall. You don't put art between two bricks in a wall. So for me, if we're going to film something, it's got to have the same creative thought as the picture itself. So when we're filming my shoots, I've mentioned this before. Big shout out to Corey, who is our DP, who used to be my assistant and a very talented filmmaker. And then I have Mike, who's over there, and I have Michelle, who's over here, and the whole team just jumps in. And then we bring in great sound people that we always work with, who are very sensitive to the atmosphere of what's going on set. But the aesthetic is really, really important. And the way we tell the story of the making of the picture is really, really important. Grain for me is really important. I love grain, its atmosphere, and it's a tribute to film. There's two photographers I have to shout out to, Daido Moriyama and William Klein. Both photographers kind of revolutionized. They were almost like anti-Richard Avedon. They were punk rock, grainy, in your face, urban, dangerous, free composition, almost like especially with Daido Moriyama. You look at his work and some people say, well, that's the worst picture I ever saw. There is zero technique there. It's total punk rock and anarchy, and there's so much excitement in his work. So I try to bring that into our aesthetic when we're telling the story of the making of the picture, because the picture is the final statement, 1/500th of a second, that has to sum up this emotional journey I've been on with my subject. But the film, the making of, the conversation needs to be brutally honest, has to be as if Daido Moriyama is shooting on the streets of Manhattan, or Martin Scorsese is filming, a taxi cab coming out of a street with the smoke coming up and it's rainy. And so all these feelings of cinema come into our work, and the more raw it is, the better. And my 35mm work is also very heavily inspired by that whole thing. If you've got the finished portrait that I take of, with my Hasselblad, for instance, then the antidote is something much more informal, much more raw, much more fluid and haphazard. And that normally means no lights, available light, push the film. If I'm shooting on my Leicas, I'm pushing 35mm to 6,400 ASA. So the grain is really raw. You can't really see the face properly sometimes. And I love that sort of, it's almost like a palate cleanser between two beautiful types of food. Sort of when you're eating sushi, it's the ginger to reset your mind. The cleanse the palate, cleanse the eyes. So hopefully that answers that.
Yeah, great. Going back to photography a little bit, Mike and I actually both really love this question that came in from Nick. What is your process when posing professional actors compared to people that have never been photographed?
Well, I don't think there's an easy path to photograph anybody. I mean, no two actors are alike. No two people are alike. I mean, no two plumbers are alike. No two electricians are alike. People are inherently different. And I've photographed actors across the board some of them, I mean, I remember photographing Jude Law, and this was when he was like just rising in his career. I think he was nominated for an Oscar the week I photographed him. So this was in the 90s or 2000s, early 2000s. And he was perfect looking. And he was the nicest guy. Like I actually had trouble taking pictures because we were just yapping too much. And, we talked about, obviously, the Beatles. He's named after Hey Jude. And, my future son would be called Jude. So we had a lovely time, and he was so generous and curious and fun and interested in the process of what we were doing that day. And then you have other times where I photographed other actors who you would think would be on the rise. I photographed Heath Ledger years later when I was in my New York studio here, actually. And he was a very different soul. I mean, an incredible actor, maybe the greatest actor of his generation. And he came to our studio, and he was quiet. He seemed troubled. He seemed disheveled a little bit. He didn't really want to make eye contact. And I took two pictures of him. One where I did get eye contact just for a split second, and you get to see how vulnerable he is, and how it felt like he didn't really believe in this world of celebrity and success. And then there's another picture where I remember asking him, do you feel that you are one of the most successful actors of your time? Because that's what everyone says. And I remember he looked down at the floor, not at me, and he kind of laughed. And I took a frame of that. I think it's black and white. And he's almost laughing at the craziness of fame. And of course, a few months later, he died. And then, of course, we all find out in the media how he was struggling, and he was really in a dark place, and I really felt for him. So they're two actors, two young men, two men in their prime, two successful people going through different journeys. But fame is sort of not very tolerant of humanity, and it's not very tolerant of people's struggles. In fact, they either don't want to know about it and bury it, or people abuse it, and they become very invasive and feel that they can intrude. And, we're talking, another person who really was struggling was Liam Payne, who tragically passed away not that long ago from One Direction. And I photographed him at the peak of One Direction power with Harry and the whole team and Louis. And, at the time, I never would have imagined that one of those beautiful young guys would end up in such a dark place and a tragic end to his young life. But if you look at the picture now of Liam, you do get a sense that there was a little bit of vulnerability there. There's a little bit of pain, even at that moment. So it's funny how just a random split second does seem to capture something in someone's soul. Cool. Next question. I didn't really answer the thing about ordinary people, did I? Well, ordinary people, what is ordinary? I don't even know anymore. And what is power? I don't really know anymore, because we assume that powerful people are the ones that shape history. But I have discovered time and time again that actually it's the ordinary people, the people, put them in quotes, who are often the ones who drive history forward and who make significant changes to our times. And I've had the privilege to work with people who have been ignored and forgotten about and hurt and abused by history, and yet somehow their story remains very powerful. And my job was always not to give them a voice. They already have a very powerful voice. It's just no one was listening to it. So with my photography, my job was to amplify their story and bring it back into the social discourse if I can, and And sometimes those stories are the ones that everyone suddenly gets hold of, and it helps people articulate what they were actually already feeling. So power to the people. Yeah, next.
So a technical question, and I thought since we're here in the studio, this could be a fun time to talk about this.
Yeah.
Jacob is asking about your infamous NASA scanner that we use for the negative. So I just had Mike kind of get it all set up. I thought maybe we could.
Should we do a walk there? All right, we haven't done this. Yeah, we haven't done this. You're coming on the road with me. All right, so let's go. All right, here we go. All right, Mike, I might need you to do a little demonstration. So we actually have. Yes, okay, so I've got to. Can you see it? All right. So this is built by NASA. And we actually have two. We have this one. This was our first one. And you can see it's had a nervous breakdown. And this is like a Stanley Kubrick moment, you know, in 2001, where Hal is having a meltdown and you pull out all the elements of the computer and slowly it shuts down. So our poor baby here is feeling a bit sad and temperamental.
We'll get her back, though.
We'll get her back. We have an amazing scientist called Ken. And Ken speaks a technical language that none of us speak. It's sort of didgeridoo language. And he gets on very well with all this stuff. So he comes in and helps fix it. So we have this other one here, which is our backup. Now, look at this equipment. It's totally Cold War aesthetic here, folks. And it's so old that we actually have to have a series of old computers. So we scan the data, we put it into an old Mac, which is this one, which says do not move. So it's transferred to that. Then that transfers to another computer, and that transfers to another computer until we're sort of at the mothership over here. And this computer now deals with the data. So it's a whole process. But there's something magical about the optics with this scanner. And it's difficult, it's temperamental, it's time consuming. But when we scan my negs, it just does something. And my retoucher, who is a legend called Bob, we call him Bobby D. He's retouched everything for me for the last 20 years. And he's one of the closest people in my life to creating photography. So Bob loves this scanner, and he's very happy when we're doing it. And now that we do shoot digital for, you know, specific shoots for whatever reason, like Trump, we actually find that we've created such a look with this process that it helps us sort of have something to match to. And 20 years retouching from this scanner actually gives us a great reference point to aim for with digital, which is a different medium, as we know, but it's good to have points of reference. All right, so I hope that was interesting to the geeks amongst us.
I'm sure they loved it.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. This is fun. I'm enjoying this. This
is
is
fun being at the studio and everyone gets to take a little.
Yeah. It's like we got 1,000 guests or something. It's great.
A lot of fun. So I've got a couple questions relating to your Leicas and your 35 millimeter work. Firstly, Renee asks, how did you get your first Leica? And then Raymond says, I know you've done some street photography. What is the difference for you between that, which is your 35 millimeter work, and your studio portrait settings?
Good questions. We pull in everything we can, folks. Whatever is available to us, we pull in. When I started taking pictures, I had a cousin who worked as a rep for a company called Leica. And his job in those days, he had 2 or 3 Leicas in the back of his car, and he would drive around from client to client and let them try out the camera. And if they liked it, then they would buy it directly from Leica. So that's how it used to work. So he heard, he was a lovely guy. His name's Peter. Big shout out to Peter. He helped me on my way. And he reached out to me one time and he said, "Oh, I've got a job. I'm dealing with cameras myself." So I said, "What is it?" He said, "I'm dealing with Leicas." I didn't know too much about photography then. I was really a student. And again, I was very poor. So he was so sweet. He used to lend me the cameras on the weekend. And I used to go around and test them out. And then I started traveling back to Greece on my holidays at college. And he would lend me Leicas for a week. And I would go and take pictures in the village on Paros with these cameras. And then I'd process all the film for months later. So gradually, as I started to do some freelance jobs and I started to earn a bit of pocket money, and I spent the rest of my grant money instead of sensible things like food and rent, I just bought my first Leica M6s. I bought two. And on one, I have a 50mm lens, and one, I have a 21mm lens. And it means I didn't need to change lenses if time is short. Didn't want to get distracted. So I always had two around my neck. The 21mm lens is a bit higher, so it hangs a bit higher. The 50mm lens is a bit lower. And I still use that same setup now. Still use the same two cameras now. And those two cameras have been with me in some crazy situations, man. They were with me when 9/11 happened and I was down there in the chaos of hell, covered in dust. They've been with me in the Egyptian Revolution, in Tahrir Square. They've been with me in the Congo. They've been, it's incredible. In Russia, shooting in some crazy situations in Russia. So, they're my safety blanket when I'm not when I'm not working in the studio. And I remember going on some trips with my dad. Once I started working, we wanted to do some trips around the world because my dad needed to teach me about travel and culture and respecting different cultures. So we went on a series of trips. Each year, we went to China, traveled through China together. We went to Colombia. We went to Egypt. And I can't remember where else we went. We traveled a lot, and I would just work day and night doing street photography. And it was where I kind of learned how to navigate the street. It's much harder for me. There are many people who are much better street photographers than me because it happens so fast, and you have to be so responsive, but you also have to understand people and read the street, because if you can't just go up to someone and just take their picture, it's like stealing some private space from them. So for me, knowing like that, the kind of photographer I am, where I have to build this relationship, how do you do that in seconds with a complete stranger? And I realized that one of the worst things you can do is just cover your face. It looks really predatorial. So I developed this trick of raising my camera, but making sure they see my face, and I'm making eye contact with them, and I'm kind of asking their permission with my eyes. And I might take a picture and then move the camera away so they can see my face, to see whether, to show that I appreciate them. And when it's amazing, the difference, that if I just move it to the side and I smile a little bit as if to say, "You look great," then they would go, "Okay, I get it." And they would just stay there. And maybe they would just lean into it even more. But if I just went up to people and just snapped, people do that very well, but that's not my scene, and I can't do it. I'm not comfortable doing it. So I figured that out on all these amazing trips with my dad. And we'd work 14, 15 hours a day for 2 weeks on a trip traveling. Oh, we also went to India, which was incredible. So after you come back from a trip like that, shooting that amount constantly each day, constantly changing environments, all photographers will know this. That kind of practice teaches you something. And you not only read people in a studio environment like here, but you start reading the street. And you start to anticipate that someone is walking in this direction who's got an interesting walk or wearing an interesting hat or doing something interesting. And you know you're not ready yet. You haven't done your light readings yet. So you look down. Have I got enough film? How many frames have I got left? Okay, I've got 8 frames. I can't reload now because I'll lose the opportunity. So I'll do light readings off the ground while I'm walking towards them. And I'll keep one eye on my camera, one eye on them. And then as they stop and start to cross the road, I know this moment is coming. So by then I've done my light readings. I lift my camera. They may turn around. And if they do, I'll gesture to them first to say, I'm here. I hope this is okay with my spirit. And then you just take a frame. And then you always say, thank you. And started to read that. And it made me a better photographer. Next question.
Cool. A little bit about your past and your future, I suppose. So Cora wants to know, was there ever a moment where you felt like giving up in photography? And Marcin wants to know, where do you see yourself in the next 10 to 20 years?
Oh, God, is there ever a moment you want to give up? I never wanted to give up. Anyone who knows me, probably Michelle most of all knows, I'm the most stubborn person in the world. So I don't really give up. Give up doesn't really work for me. But I definitely have days where it's hard. And I definitely have days where I don't have it. And I don't want to face anyone. We all have those days, just to be human, especially if you are pushing yourself to extreme levels in anything that you do. You've got to compensate by resting and, healing and putting back what you've taken out. And I've seen so many really talented people get that wrong, and they start replenishing with bad things instead of healthy things. I think of what we do you have to think of yourself, think of the resources you have as a person. Most of us think that our resources are from here to here. And when we're really stressed and tired, we think we've hit the edge of our resources. But what you don't know is that there's a hidden extra 10% that it's a hidden secret. Now, the greatest athletes in the world know about that extra 10%. The greatest musicians, performers know about that extra 10%. The most powerful CEOs probably know about that extra 10%. That extra 10% is a hidden resource. It's called the emergency resource. And it's there because as humans, if our lives are threatened, no matter how tired we may be, we're given an extra 10% to run like crazy. And hopefully it might give us enough energy to just survive. That's really important that we get to know what that is. Now, if you're going to do great work, it's often in that hidden 10%. But it's a very dangerous 10% to navigate, because if you use it all up, that is the edge. If you go past that edge, then you are really jumping off a cliff, whether it's physical or whether it's emotional. That's the edge. So if you are operating in that 10%, you've got to know yourself really, really well. And you've got to understand how you can function within those 10 percentage points. Every percentage point is very valuable. Now, most of my good work has been in that zone where I'm either stressed, tired, distracted, burnt out, and I know that I've got to use those last resources to take this to that extra level. And I have, as I say, I've seen many people use that 10% in their creative work, but what happens is that they got reckless with it. And if you push yourself past that last percentage point, you become broken. And that's when you turn to other things after that to heal, to compensate, whether it's drugs, whether it's alcohol, or whatever it may be, to try and cover up the damage that you have done to yourself. You gave too much. So I've tried to be aware and respectful of my own weaknesses and strengths. But a couple of times I have gone past it, and you do break, and it can take months to come back from that, and you have to give yourself time. So did I ever want to quit? No. I can't quit. It's how can you quit yourself? I mean, it's like this, to create is to be alive. But I've had really bad days where I don't want to speak to anyone. And I've got this trick where, okay, today you feel shit. So that's okay. It's allowed. You're a human being. So don't get out of bed that day. Stay in your pajamas that day. Just watch TV that day. It's okay. Don't call anyone. Give yourself 24 hours to be as depressed and lonely and wallow in self-pity as you bloody well need to do. But after 24 hours, it's over. The end. You've had it. You've got it out your system. You get back on the saddle. You clean yourself up. You get back in the race, and you fight another day. But if you don't give yourself a little bit of time, you're denying yourself what your body is telling you and what your heart is telling you to rest and heal. And a little bit of self-pity never did anyone any harm, but it's got to be a time limit, because then it becomes self-indulgent. So the future, God knows. Who knows what's around the corner? And as we know in our office, we never know what's around the corner. All the people we photographed, no one knew what was around the corner for them. And sometimes the most powerful people tumble the quickest. So we just got news today, even that I won't say who it is, but someone about as powerful as it gets has just tumbled. And it's always a shock, because as a bystander, I'm always standing dangerously close to power. It's like Icarus. You don't want to fly too close to the sun, or your wings the wax in your wings will melt and you'll fall. So I'm very aware, don't get too close to the bright light of power. It's very seductive, but very dangerous. And people tumble. So who knows what's around the corner? We just hope we're doing good work, and we hope we're stimulating some respectful debate with you guys, because in the end, that's what it's really about. To raise some interesting issues in society through our work. So if we can carry on doing that, then that's cool.
Yeah,
I'm good with that.
Cool. We've got a great question in the chat here. Yara Gallo says, when you photograph someone powerful, are you trying to reveal their humanity or challenge their authority? And are those the same thing? And maybe with that, we've got a lot of people here, 3 or 4, also asking about your Putin story, which kind of goes hand in hand with that question. So maybe you can answer both there.
Putin, wow. Well, that was one of those moments. You don't get too many of those moments in life. And I was very aware, actually, of the moment, what it might mean. If I get it right, I think the most important thing is to be honest. And there's so much pressure to make a judgment call. But curiosity has got to be number one. Judgment mustn't be in the equation. It's not for me to judge. It's for me to say, well, this is what really happened on this day. And it's not the whole truth. It's 1/500th of a second. So how can that be the whole truth? But if you are able to tune into someone's frequency, takes a lot of concentration sometimes, especially under those circumstances. But if you're able to do that, the person that you're tuning into also is aware that you have tuned into their frequency. So I knew it and Putin knew it, that we were both in a kind of zone together. And when that happens, you kind of have permission to move around their psyche. They're allowing you to do that. That's an extraordinary thing with anybody, let alone someone like Putin. And when you're in that space, that's when you really discover a side of that person that very few people get to see. And that's my job as a photographer, to try and document that experience in a still. So the picture I took of Putin, I mean, it's very strange because some people love that picture. But Putin loves that picture. His supporters love that picture because it shows him as a tough nationalist. It shows him as someone who is not trying to impress the West. He's almost nonchalant, almost emotionless in his agenda to put Russia at the seat of power again on the global scale. But Putin's opponents also love that picture because it gave them a banner to show everything that they believe is wrong with power and authority in Russia. And people like Pussy Riot have used that picture in demonstrations. In fact, the picture has been used in thousands of times, I believe, in demonstrations, particularly in Russia. People photoshopped, horns on him and, all these clever tricks, and they used it as banners in demonstrations. So much so that I heard not that long ago that a decree was issued from the Russian administration that anyone who circulates my pictures of Putin in connection with human rights in Russia could go to jail or would go to jail. And those pictures have been labeled as extremist material. But it's the same picture. It's just all about context. And it's certainly, if ever I wanted to raise a debate, that's one picture that did it. So people in power, if you humanize them, strangely enough, no matter what happens to their legacy, that picture still seems kind of relevant. And that's when it's a good picture. And I don't always succeed in doing that. But a few times I've been able to succeed. And even if someone's legacy dramatically changes, you still look at that picture and it still kind of sums up what's happening in society. I can give you an example. I photographed Harvey Weinstein a few times in here. And I photographed him also with his brother, and it's a tough picture. And I remember when I took the picture back in those days, it kind of represented bad boy Hollywood swagger, almost like this cool gangster mafioso type power system in Hollywood. But of course, now it represents an absolute monster who abused his power and authority in the media. But if you look at the picture, it's still the same picture, and it still kind of works, even though the narrative and history has flipped upside down. So that only happens when you get inside someone's brain, get inside someone's heart with their permission, and you're allowed to walk around the hallways of their psyche and open a few doors and see what you discover. It's the most magical, strange job you can imagine you can do. And I don't really know how it works, but I know that when I'm doing it, I feel 200% alive. Next question.
I think we have time for one more, and I want to go back to film because that's why we're all here on YouTube, is to watch your films roll out. So let's talk about your last film and how the Nile session came about, and then maybe we can give the audience a little glimpse into what and who is to come.
Okay, good question. So as I said in our last Q&A live thing, we're now filming my shoots whenever possible. Of course, we need our subjects' permission and blessing and collaboration. So it's not really behind the scenes from a distance. My sitters are completely involved in the process and they're sharing their humanity, but we're sharing our work process with them. And the whole thing becomes this beautiful, transparent production where we're all in it together. And because of the advances of technology, we're able to just share it with you. So I met Nile Rodgers at Davos, and we gave him, I served on the board there at the time for art and culture, and we gave him an award because of his incredible charity, the We Are Family Foundation, that he created to support social inclusion and support young people around the world. Very inspiring work. And Nile came to collect his award. I met him afterwards. I met his wife, Nancy, his partner of life, Nancy, and I met his publicist, Fran. And what beautiful people, straight away, man. It was just like Nile radiates this magical quality, similar actually to Quincy Jones's spirit. Quincy Jones radiated this warmth and humility and joy of life. But Nile is just, I mean, the guy is just a very beautiful, special human being. So we hit it off, and I invited him to the studio to do a picture to actually help his charity, to give him a banner to create more publicity for his charity. So he graciously came, but then by then I said, well, why don't we film it, Niall? He was cool with that. So obviously he shows up dressed head to foot in Chanel. I mean, the guy looks like beyond rock star, pure class. Sunglasses by Chanel. And he's got his famous guitar with him, which is called the Hitmaker, which is a Fender Stratocaster that he's been playing since the beginning. He asked Mike to get him an amp. So one of the, I want to say, Mike, you can say hello. Say hello.
Hello, hello.
Yeah, Mike confessed to me that one of the best days of his job so far was going to a rental house and renting an amp. And they said, what's it for? And he said, it's for Nile Rodgers. And they're like, bloody hell. So it's got nothing to do with photography. And so we got the amp here. He sat down and I started, we mic'd him, we mic'd me, cameras start rolling. And as you can see in the film, he's just so human and honest. And I said to him, look, Niall, the world is so divided now. Everyone's at each other's throats. Everyone's tribal. Everyone is in echo chambers. I've seen you on stage at Madison Square Garden. I've danced to your songs at parties from when I was 18. You always brought life and joy to wherever you are. And everyone hits the dance floor. Suddenly no one is thinking about all the normal divisions in society that separate us. I said, what do you know that we don't know? What does unity mean? And he told this beautiful story, which is in the film. So if you haven't seen it, please see it. And he talked about what it means to be an artist, that your job is to touch the souls of 1 million strangers, people who you will probably never meet, but your your art somehow resonates with them. And it's a life of generosity, but it's also a life of beautiful privilege to be able to do that. And as he's doing that, he starts to cry. And I'm sure Nile has told that story before, but there's something about this room, the intensity that we were all feeling that day, the emotional investment that we had all put into this. Nile felt it, that this moment matters. And that's something that links all my favorite pictures, whether it's someone seriously famous, powerful, or it's someone who's forgotten by history. If you believe this moment matters, then that moment becomes history. And that moment with Nile mattered, and he felt it. So he got emotional, and it's beautiful to see someone so at the height of his creative powers break in such a human, beautiful way. And he's breaking for a good reason, nothing to be ashamed about. He's showing that he's so emotionally touched and invested in the process of sharing his feelings with the world through his music that he actually sheds a tear on camera in front of all these people. So I'm very privileged to have caught that on film, and Nile gave me full backing to release it to the world. So we made the film, and then I needed to show it to him to get his permission. So the next year at Davos, he was there again, and Davos is crazy, man. Behind the scenes, it's so noisy, and you got like world leaders rushing around with all their bodyguards. You've got CEOs hustling for bilateral meetings. You know, all of a sudden there's a crowd running by, and it's Zelensky, and then it's someone else. You know, and so that I couldn't find a place that's quiet, that's appropriate to show Nile this film. And as my team always know, I'm the least technological person in the planet. So I had my iPad, and I had a little speaker, and I just about figured out how to use Bluetooth and connect the bloody speaker to the iPad. So, but it was too noisy. So I persuaded one of the security guards to let us into a tiny little closet that's really for catering supplies. And it was tiny. It's like, you know, there's room for 2 vacuum cleaners and a coffee machine in there. So me, Nile Rodgers, Fran, his publicist, Nancy, his lovely love of his life, we're all squeezed into this closet, and I'm in there with one of the most important legends in music. And I'm holding my speaker in one hand, and I'm holding the iPad in another, and I'm kind of balancing on an old coffee machine. And I'm playing this film, and Niall's crying in the film. And outside that closed door, it was chaos of power. And I thought, all that power outside means nothing to me, because I'm in a bloody closet with the most inspiring person in the world right now. And this is another one of those moments. So at the end of film ends, picture comes up, and then Niall turns to me and he says, "You got me." So that was it. Full green light, full approval, and how happy I am to have shared it as one of our first films on our channel. So I hope you liked it. We got a good one coming up. Different vibe, really different vibe, but equally as important. It's of an incredible human being called Tristan Harris, who used to work in the tech industry and quit and dedicated the rest of his life to warning us about the dangers of social media and AI. And he came to the studio. I met him when I did a TED talk, and he was there. We had a very meaningful conversation after my presentation, and he talked to me about, in a very honest way, about the struggles to sort of enter that social discourse at a time when everyone seems so obsessed with AI and social media, and not enough people are asking questions about how will this, what is there a dark side to all this technology, and how could it shape us in the wrong way? We're all driven by money and sort of convenience, but there's a dark side too. And as with all inventions, it can be used for something great and something bad. So he came to the studio, and we did a film with him. Pictures are really powerful. And I remember that day, Polly, my daughter, my son Jude was also here, both teenagers. And I said to Tristan, Tristan, there's two young people right here in the studio helping us out today, holding reflectors, passing camera equipment. And if you could speak to them on behalf of the technology community about the dangers of AI and social media, what would you like to say? And once again, that powerful moment kicked in, and he paused. I mean, he's so eloquent. He's so good at communication, but all of a sudden, emotion and information collided in his brain, and I could feel the struggle and the conflict in him. What will come to the surface more, emotion or information and communication? And he got a little choked, and he paused for about a minute, and it was a minute of silence. We all felt it in the room, that keep the cameras rolling and just stay with him, support him through this, so he can say perhaps the most important thing he's ever going to say in his life. And then he looked up directly at my kids, and he said, I'm sorry that the people who came before you were not more careful. Boom. So that's a little moment in the film that you're about to see, and we're going to launch it in a couple of weeks, 10 days or something.
May 1st. Be on the lookout.
May the 1st. Keep a lookout. And again, it's a great privilege for all of us in our studio here to have these shapers and influencers of society come through our doors and share their ideas in a very honest, human, authentic way. The trust they place on us to feel that sincerity and that, you could say, vulnerability is an extraordinary thing. So we always treat that responsibility very seriously. We try to be respectful to it. And the film we've made of Tristan Harris is a beautiful, very powerful film. And I hope you like it. But more importantly, there's a very powerful message in that one, that we want you to think very carefully about all these incredible tools that we're all using. And hopefully we can all use these tools more for good than for bad. And let's all be honest, we all know when we're wasting our time. We all know when we're going down a rabbit hole. It just takes a lot of discipline to steer ourselves back into a proper existence. And funnily enough, Michelle, you were just telling me earlier today how Michelle took a couple of well-earned days off last week, and she said she went out into the nature near the Grand Canyon, and she was looking up at the stars with her husband and one night, and she just felt how beautiful life really is. Now that's there's no social media there, there's no technology there. It's like raw. This is a humbling moment to be alive. And David Hockney said something that really inspired me. He's one of my favorite artists, and someone said to him, it's just so much bad news on TV all the time. You turn on the news and it's all bad. You turn on CNN, it's all bad. It's like, oh my God, the whole world is ending. And they said, but have you got any good news? And he said, yeah, spring is here. Yes. How cool is that? Yep. So I thought it's nice to end on a positive note, folks,
Absolutely.
because we're all lucky to be alive. The thing is if we've got any tools and skills, let's mobilize them and send them into battle, but a battle for good, not a battle for bad. So thanks for tuning in. I'm really enjoying the unrehearsed quality of this, because I have no idea what you're all going to ask. And I hope it shows that it's just nice to just be authentic and not deliver well-rehearsed one-liners, but to do what my subjects do for me. They're not rehearsed, and I always appreciate that. So it's nice to be able to share it with you. So thank you for tuning in. I hope this is interesting and stimulating and useful, and we're going to carry on doing this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Please keep sending in your comments, because we do read them, and it's really lovely to understand how you're all feeling and what you will say. And let's build this channel. Let's all feel part of something exciting and democratic, and let's build something together. And I'd like it to get really big one day, just in terms of people power and numbers. That's all we care about here. So thank you for tuning in.
Yep.
And see you next time. Bye.
Bye, guys. Cool.
Cool.